of your page, there's something called group chat. That's your sandbox. Use it to play. Go ahead and feel free to say whatever you want there. There's no judgment. Although if a theme emerges, we'd love to weave that into the conversation. And we also have the more formal Q&A. That's where you can ask your questions. I'll be sure to pass them along to our guest today. So I'll start now with the official introduction. Right there, the man you can see right there in the video is Adair. And Ian has been, a force in this field for a long while. But to give you a proper introduction, he is an influencer, a speaker. You may have seen him do his work at TEDx or one of your fundraising conferences around the country, a consultant, a nonprofit leader and executive, and now the author, of course, of his newest book, which I'll let him introduce to you in just a minute. Although it's not actually in print yet, but you'll have to order pre-pub, and I hope you will after we're done today. He's been in this social good sector for over 2 decades, serving in a variety of management and executive positions for everything from Boys and Girls Clubs of America to T-Mobile to the Edgar Martinez Foundation, and now the Grace Point Foundation, which he was telling me a little bit more about a few minutes ago, because you've probably heard about it already, but its impact is pretty extraordinary, not just in Tampa Bay where he's located, but all around the country, providing integrated mental health, substance abuse, and medical care to promote health and wellness. And he is right there as executive director. It's a great pleasure to welcome Ian. Thank you so much for hanging out today.
I appreciate it, Jay. It's been a long time coming. I was trying to add up how long I believe we've been connected through social media, and I want to say it's probably close to 10 years.
Yeah. For almost as long as we've been on social media, right? Yeah.
It's been great, though, and I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I'm really passionate about how mental health impacts our sector, and so I really appreciate the opportunity to come on today and just chat with you a little bit.
You know, and even before we dig into that, I do want to say that I know that you'll be talking a little bit about maybe hesitancy to address these issues at all, which is why it's so great that you're doing so. But maybe that should inform also people's participation today. So if you're out there and you have a thought, a story, a question, we will not read your name unless you want us to. But I hope you'll be a part of the conversation. So please feel free to use the Q&A, which is kind of anonymous, or the group chat where everybody can see you talking, but they're just going to see your first name and the first initial of your last name. And I hope that you use that as a platform to be a part of this today. Ian, I want to ask you what drew you to this subject in the first place. I mean, there's a big, fat, amazing quote on the Grace Point site about it, but can you introduce why this is so important to you personally?
I've been, involved with the nonprofit sector for a while, and I think anytime we work for organizations, we try to find organizations that we have a real connection with the mission and the services and the population served. And so for my third opportunity to come back and be an executive director, I really wanted to make sure that it was something I could really connect with on a personal level. So mental illness, and I speak very openly about my family history, and my history with it is something that's impacted me for a very long time. I've only felt comfortable only in the last 6 to 7 years to share my story and talk more about it and talk more about how it impacted my family. But it's something that as a young person growing up, my father had a drug addiction and left very early when I was young for the last time, several times, but for the last time when I was 12, 13 years old. And then my mother and brother both have suicide attempts in their past. My mother's been passed away for a long time now, and my brother also lives with mental illness. And so when you're a caregiver, you get immersed in doing that. But when you start to feel negative thoughts, or when you start to feel depression, or when you start to feel anxiety, who do you go to for help when you're known as the one who helps? And so I started really addressing the issues that I was having in my 20s, and sought counseling and just spent a majority of my adult life battling depression on and off. But then finding the support system I need, the self-care that I need, and just surrounding myself with the right people. And so I knew this was a great landing spot for me to be a part of this foundation, to work for a larger body mental health organization. And I'm glad I have a connection to it. And I'm surrounded every day by people that also have a strong connection to our mission.
You work with a lot of people there. I mean, Grace Point. And you were telling me a little bit about that before. Can you share a pinch more about that with everybody here today?
Sure. So the foundation is the philanthropic arm of Grace Point, which is a very large mental health organization that's known for being the crisis behavioral health emergency room for our county. So we're in the Tampa area. Hillsborough County is a very large county here in the state of Florida. We're serving about 30,000 plus people a year. So that's a pretty high volume. Most people don't realize in the community at large, we're getting that message out more and more, but don't realize just how many people we serve. We have so many lines of business. So we're inpatient crisis care, usually 72-hour stabilization units for both adults and children. And then we also have outpatient therapy, but we do a number of community-based programs that are impacting our homeless population, that are impacting our high-risk children and families, a lot of case management. And so we're doing a lot of things on our campus. So if you add up how maybe somebody can come through crisis care, they could probably be handed off to another one of our services. And so if you look at those numbers, we're probably serving closer to 60,000 people a year in our community.
Mm-hmm. And have those numbers risen, or has the nature of the care changed, or I don't know, intensified over the last several months? I mean, we've all been going through kind of our own crisis one way or another, right?
Yeah, kind of living in these COVID times, a lot of things have changed. I think for a long time for us, our outpatient, there's a lot of stigma associated with mental illness. Let's just take a step back. And so when you do finally take that courageous step to deal with an issue that you're having, sometimes, getting an evaluation and making an appointment is one hurdle, but then showing up is another hurdle. So before COVID, it was always in our strategic plan to incorporate telehealth, the ability just to talk to a counselor like we're talking today, because we thought that might be a better option for some people in getting over that initial barrier to come out and see us and seek help. With COVID, we've had to really ramp things up. And so we went from being about 15% telehealth throughout our entire organization. And if you look at our outpatient services, we're serving around 1,500 people a week. And we had to move to 100% telehealth in around a 6 to 8 week period. So there's a lot of people now who aren't letting that barrier of transportation. They're not letting that barrier of actually showing up and sitting in front of somebody get in their way, and they're seeking help. So I think we're seeing more people at our outpatient level than we have in a long time because, and I know we get more into this, but I know COVID has been an unhealthy experience, to say the least, for so many of us. And for the longest time, I think probably most people did not understand what it was like to live with a mental illness. But now with quarantine and forced isolation and social distancing and remote working, we've lost that connectiveness. And I think now more people are starting to realize what it's like to feel alone, what it's like to feel isolated. They're starting to feel more depressed. And that has probably caused a rise in the number of people we see through our outpatient services.
It's interesting that there's been a lot of discussion about the schools, and I know there has been in Florida recently too. When is it safe to be in school? What's the morbidity rate for children? There are all these things, and a lot of it seems statistical in nature. But there's an undercurrent to that, which is about the mental health of children and their parents and so forth. Of course, experiencing all these things that you were just describing. And I can imagine that must be one of those things that you're addressing through Grace Point, right? That if kids are sitting behind a laptop like you and I are, we might be a little more accustomed to it than they are. But we also talk about the resilience of children. Has that issue come up in the care menu?
I think with kids, it's been a lot different with children, because I think children are learning through screen technology more and more and more. And so they were kind of used to that e-learning shift. I think it was hardest for parents, because now, whether some of us were working part-time already, or used to working at home, or used to working remotely on the road, visiting clients or at conferences, we never had our child behind us in the living room on a Zoom call doing e-learning. And now you might have everybody in your house in a different room doing either Zoom calls or whatever format or platform we're using. There's a lot of them. Sure. So that was new to us. And I think a lot of people that had never worked remotely said, I don't like working remotely. This is awful. But they were kind of shotgunned into what that idea of remote working is. That's not normal. So I know for my 10-year-old, it wasn't a hard transition to learn through technology. It's been a hard transition to be distant from his close friends and that social interaction that all kids need. So that's probably been the hardest, but we've had really pretty good success with e-learning, pretty good success with teachers coming up with creative lesson plans. But I think for anything, that really hasn't affected the children as much as it's affected the mental health of the parents now, who are having to be around their kids longer, and they're also having to help tutor their kids more and help with that education more than they ever have.
Well, and it sounds like you're experiencing it yourself as a dad right now. So how has that been? I mean, I was a former teacher, and my wife was a former teacher. So we've done a really good job. She's done a better job than I have. My son, I unfortunately grew up with lots of learning disabilities. My son has some as well. So it breaks my heart to see him struggle, but he's actually done really well through the e-learning. He's a screen native, like a lot of kids his age. He'll bounce from one screen to the next. And I think a lot of the kids really kind of learned along with their teachers and made that transition okay. We're just more worried about his social emotional learning, not being away from so long from that connection with other kids. And so, we're still very early into this. I think we're 6 months, Jay. So we're not quite sure, as they look to push the school starting date back, how this is going to affect kids even more. I think we're going to see that long-term effect on children more in the next 6 months. I think what we've seen the most is that effect on parents and professionals over the first 4 or 5, because it's been so new for us. Sure. And of course, I'm asking about this because I'm interested to see how you're coping. I know that's a good example for us, but also because I think that some of these issues are the same ones we experience in our little petri dish of the nonprofit world, which you talk so much to. So kind of pivoting to that, are you, as a professional in our sector, have you been running into more people who are willing to say, hey, just kind of offline, I've been struggling too? And are people starting to talk more? And are these platforms facilitating that? Are they compelling us to talk more, or the opposite?
I don't know if they're compelling us to talk more. And, to the first part of your question, I think people are disclosing more how they feel. I think we've been given a lot of air cover to do that. And it's not usually through the best circumstances we get that air cover. We get it when there's a high profile suicide. We get it when there's a school shooting. We get it when there's anything that talks about mental health in a negative light. But then that still opens the door why it's trending on social media to say, I understand what's going on with somebody. I'm feeling that way too. I think more of us are talking offline. Now, I say talking because when I used to present at conferences or wherever I was, I would ask people, I'd hold up my phone and say, who gets mad or upset when their phone rings? Because you wish the person would just text you. And almost the entire room would raise their hand. They'd get upset because we're so busy and we're so used to wanting to talk on our own time. Now, when the phone rings, I don't care if it's a telemarketer. I want to have a conversation. Even when an iPhone says, like on the screen, scam likely, I want to talk. So, we're not really disclosing as much on Zoom calls. That's not really our water cooler time. That's just our professional meeting time. But we're calling people more, and maybe we're texting more personal information, but we're telling people I'm having a rough time. I'm emotionally spent. I think one of the other things that I like saying, like one of my opening jokes forever, Jay, was we've been so visceral through most sectors, but especially the nonprofit sector, to accommodating people that want to do a flexible work schedule or that want to work remote. And there's a lot of executive directors and a lot of boards that are like, well, how do we know if they're working? Are they just at home, watching Netflix? But we've learned, and the research is showing, that people are actually working more. They're more productive. They're more efficient. They're getting more done working at home. But then I asked the question, at what cost to their mental health? Because if we're constantly stressed out, trying to break the stigma of what it's like to work remote, trying to make believe we need to be available and ready at all times. So every time a notification comes, we got to answer it. Every time an email comes, we got to respond right away like it's a text. So there's actually more stress involved in what's going on. So the joke before was always, I never knew of an organization in any case study that went bankrupt or closed its doors because of a flexible work schedule.
Right.
And then, then I would get hopefully 2 chuckles. But now it's like people are starting to realize we can close our brick and mortar because our people are getting a lot done. And then what else are they not doing? Now that they're working from home, more people are not taking advantage of PTO. They're not taking vacation because they're told to stay inside. So if they're told to stay inside, they think they might as well work, even when they're burnt out, tired, or stressed. So all of this is creating a unique environment in our sector because we have that extra stress of having to keep the lights on, keep our population served, keep people paid, and that's tough. And I was just talking to a good friend today, and the amount of stress that she is under and the stories that she was telling me, I think are very relevant to this conversation in that, their executive director is telling them we might have to cut people from full-time to part-time if we don't raise enough money. But luckily our development team is on the job. And I'm like, that's just 100% pushing the accountability onto the fundraiser to now that they're thinking, oh my gosh, it's up to me to lead this organization and be fiscally responsible, or people that I'm close to, I care about, I work with each and every day, might lose their job and their benefits. And so that's the amount of stress we're under. And we need to wake up and realize that we can't be doing that to our people.
One of the potential problems there isn't just stigma, which I'd love you to talk about, and it's a great segue to what you've just written about, but also this kind of compartmentalization within our organizations. So if we're sitting in a physical office somewhere, you have different people perform different functions, and maybe the reporting structure is such that I'm talking with you today, and I'm not really talking to my colleague who's 20 feet away, not because I don't like them, but just because that's just the way these verticals have been set up. And I guess by going virtual, we may have solved one problem, while causing another, of course. People are working constantly now, so we don't really have to worry that they're not working. We may have to worry that they're working too much. There's a burnout issue. There are all those other pressures. But what about that issue about how people communicate? Because what you just said there was, here's a C-level exec who says, hey, don't worry, fundraiser is taking it on. Well, that's the ultimate compartmentalization. Now the CEO, and you're an executive director, or the board chair, maybe they've been able to sort of pass the ball. But it's a virtual ball. That's a lot tougher than if they're in the same space where maybe they can go in and have that little chat. How are we dealing with compartmentalization?
Yeah, we're not. I mean, that's the short answer is we're not. And I think everyone, especially people that should be held accountable or people where the buck should stop, and that's usually with executive directors or boards, aren't having those conversations like, how can we get by and take care of our people? You can say we can't run without, raising a certain amount of money. You can't run without good people. I mean, they're the ones that do the work. And so employees should always come first. And I think, even in having that conversation this morning with my friend in fundraising, that was a quarterly email saying, well, we were going to have to lay people off or go part-time July 1st. Now that's been pushed to the end of September. So let's keep up the good work. And so you're constantly on this roller coaster, this emotional and mental roller coaster. And nobody wants our future, our fate to be in somebody else's hands. And, it's who are we going to blame when that happens? And it's not necessarily that person that's doing the fundraising. There's a lot of factors that are going on and that are involved. So the communication needs to change, definitely. And we need to figure out how we can be in this together. And more people need to take on accountability and not push responsibility. So that's kind of, the message that, I keep getting from a lot of people. A lot of people reach out to me because they know I'm in this field. There's a lot going on in this sector. People in the trenches doing the work, and it's hard. We need to be in this together. I admire the education sector because they push the initials PLN for everything, professional learning network. But for fundraisers, we just kind of have to do it on our own. We have to find like-minded people we've been connected with on social media for decades with, or for whatever it is, people we see at conferences. So we need to start helping each other out on the mental side of things and the self-care side of things, because that's the only way we're going to do the most good.
Yeah, and just as a personal note, the fact that people know you and they know you're talking about these issues and you're open about your own experience and how you've worked with that. So that's an example for any of us. That means, of course, that you're back in that caregiver role, because you may not be the head of whatever the therapeutic services are that we called at Grace Point. But if every fundraiser in America is looking to Ian for these solutions, that's a lot to bear on your shoulders. How are you contending with that?
It's well, not everybody yet, but if anyone thought that Jay Frost was advertising for that to happen, please do not.
That's not the intention.
I'm happy to do it because I'm happy to do it, and when I can't do it, I easily have to say I need a break. I think we have to learn to say no. That's a popular phrase in the corporate world. It's got to be. It needs to be also in the nonprofit world. We take on too much. I already work in crisis mental health, addiction, and homeless. So the content matter, the people that I'm supporting that are doing amazing work is already tough, So I take on helping other people or getting them to realize there's places they can go to seek help, because it's also good for my mental health. Because then I'm not branding and marketing and social media and fundraising right now. I'm actually back doing some direct service and helping people. Yeah. So actually, trying to help others or encourage them is also part of my own self-care and my own mental health. So I enjoy doing it.
Well, and writing this book, as you've just done, I'm sure also gives people a framework to think about this and maybe build a language for talking about it within their families and amongst professionals without everybody picking up the phone to call you. Although it sounds like you don't mind a phone call from a spammer, so maybe you'll take a few from us. But tell us about your book, because I know it's not a release yet, but it's coming soon. So tell us what the origin is, and so forth.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Stronger Than Stigma, and the tagline is call to action: stories of grief, loss, and inspiration. Stigma has been the number one factor preventing people from getting help with their mental health or addiction. And that doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense at all, because all stigma is it just refers to unfavorable beliefs or thoughts that are directed towards something or someone. And if you look it up or if you Google it, it says it's a mark of disgrace. So if we're more worried about what people are going to think when we disclose than our own health and getting help, that's an issue. So mental illness is very well known to be treatable. Treatment options are very successful. But again, we're letting things get in the way of us getting that help. We would never break our leg, and not go to urgent care or the ER to get that fixed. But when we've had negative thoughts, or when we feel overwhelming depression, we sometimes wait for a long time because we don't know what's happening to us and we're scared to talk about it. And right now, what all the research is telling us is sometimes people wait 8 to 10 years before they even seek help.
Wow. And it's not, I'm sure this is the wrong analogy, but pressure doesn't just dissipate with time, does it? I mean, it must be like air filling the balloon. So if you're waiting longer and longer and longer and storing up all that experience and that emotion, that must be quite a lot to bear.
It is, and I think I'm glad you did use that analogy, because I think a lot of the stories that are being shared in the book, and it does chronicle 12 personal stories, and then there's some call to action chapters of what people can do in the corporate world, what men can do, because the suicide rate for men is the highest among any group. How we can act and how we can respond to people that tell us they're suffering, and how we can act ourselves, because we've all been through something. And I think I mentioned it, that mental health's had bad PR for a long time. They're constantly using the same statistics, and we see them all the time, which 1 in 5 people will experience a mental illness every year. Well, when I say that at a conference, I usually see people on the end of the row look down at the 4 people next to them and wonder which one of those 4 it's going to be. Right. So that's not the message we want to get across. What we need to get across is that 5 in 5 of us have mental health, and that we're all connected to this in some way. One of the other little polling questions I ask when I speak is, who in this room has been impacted by mental illness, suicide, or addiction, either themselves, their family, or their inner circle, their closest 5 to 6 friends? And instead of 1 in 5 being the number that people focus on, 99% of the room raises their hand.
Right.
And that's how we have to address the situation. It makes no sense in my mind whatsoever that suicide is the second leading cause of death from 10-year-olds to 34-year-olds, and the fourth leading cause of death from 35-year-olds to 54-year-olds, and we don't talk about it until a celebrity dies by suicide.
Yeah. And I know it's not a contagion per se, but obviously it's strong enough in the numbers, and it obviously affects so many of us and our families that not talking about it also seems bizarre. That's not so there's
right.
stigma that we feel, but then there's kind of this broader social stigma which causes us to be silent, and
right.
that's pretty scary. Is that also something which is particularly pronounced in, let's say, the fundraising field, where a lot of the people who might tune into this are in that profession? Because we want to be authentic. We know that, right. But we have a certain veneer, right? We're going to address a certain way, and we're going to do well with our donors. We're going to try to be thoughtful about what we say. We're going to be good listeners, but all of that means sometimes we hold back a little bit because we're representing. So is this a problem that we particularly have to deal with?
I think so. I think all working professionals do. I'm glad that celebrities and athletes and former Olympians and on down the line, whoever's got social influence, I'm glad they're talking more about anxiety and depression and addiction. But we give those groups a little bit of air cover because there's a lot of pressure on them. And I know you're very successful at what you do, but I don't know what paparazzi is waiting for you when you leave. When we're done discussing today. So, I think professionals, the rest of us, what I want to call the regular people, I don't know if that's the best term, but the rest of us, whether we're retired seniors, whether working professionals, whether we're students, fear of disclosing is very real. And we fear losing the 3 things that matter the most to us in our lives. And that's our friends, our families, and our jobs. And I think when you look at the fundraising profession, because we are the ultimate representation of the groups that we serve, we do have to have a public face that sometimes is very much hiding what we're going through in our own life. So there's a lot of fear for me for those in our sector, because they have to have that public face, because they are hiding behind it, and the undue amount of stress that's on them right now to keep the doors open, to keep people paid, to keep programs running. There's going to be some long-term effects to this, and we need to watch out for each other.
Well, I don't know what our associations can do to help facilitate that. I mean, if AFPs and others are inviting to speak, that's a piece. It's education. That's important. But what else can we be doing collectively as a profession to ensure that those conversations are happening, and not just amongst ourselves privately, one-to-one, but also throughout the entire field and with those to whom we either report or we partner with?
Right. I think AFP is doing a really good job. They're they have invited me to speak. They've invited a lot of other great people to speak on personal and lived experience. We know right now there's a lot of pressure on us, a lot of stress on those in our profession. And I think a lot of groups really are stepping up. But it goes beyond just taking in the information. We have to be accountable for that. Self-care might have been a watered down term a few years ago, and it might have been overused, and people thought, well, what does that really mean? Does that mean just go for a walk? But we really have to figure out where we can put on our calendars, where we can peel ourselves away to have that self-care. I mean, you have a guitar sitting right behind you, and that is self-care. And
it's real. This is real.
Tip now, ladies and gentlemen. But it's, all these things are, I've had a lot of hobbies in my life that I put on hold because I find myself working twice as much, and I no longer do those things that were a huge part of my self-care. So we have to hold ourselves accountable to take care of ourselves, because if we don't do that, we'll never be able to take care of our organizations and the populations we serve. So it really comes to holding yourself accountable. And sometimes that means having somebody you can talk to this about, because for some people, it's easier to hold themselves accountable to somebody else. So, I have friends that check in with me because they're holding themselves accountable to me, telling them, you need to do this. Let's take care of yourself so you can function at the level that you want to function.
Yeah, I wonder again if maybe just the very act that when you release the book, when it's actually available to us, giving us a language to discuss these things in the same way that AFP and others have brought you in to facilitate that conversation, to share your stories, but also allow people to open up and share theirs. That will give us a way to have that conversation be more fruitful, so we can bring it back into our own lives. And in light of that, I do want to make sure I honor the audience here. We did have one comment. Otherwise, people are just listening. So we appreciate your listening. But if you have comments or questions, feel free to enter them. But we had a comment earlier, and I want to make sure I honor it by reading it, which is that, yes, education does recognize PLN and self-care. Why? And are there other areas that recognize burnout? And where did the thought leadership in that area come from? So do you have thoughts about recognition of burnout and where people can look for thought leadership and make sure that that's brought into our organizations and into our work?
I think there's a lot of people out there that talk about it, but they're not really specific to our sector. And because I think a lot of times, maybe the nonprofit sector itself, because there's stigma attached to it, there's people that think that we work for hugs and we work for, feel goods, and they forget just how much goes in to this work. And sometimes they forget the populations we serve, how draining that can be. I think you got to find what works for you. I mean, there's lots of people that I follow. There's lots of things that are part of my self-care, whether it's reading, whether it's working out, whether it's trying to play guitar, although I've heard you before, I'm not as good as you. So there's lots of ways to do it, but we got to find what works and speaks to us. Education jumped on that when they started to see a huge decline in teacher recruitment and how long teachers were staying in the profession. I used to run an equity and education foundation, revolving around teachers of color, and looking at, a vast majority of people were leaving at the 3-year mark and at the 5-year mark. And then where were they? So we have that same revolving door in our sector. And I know AFP, and I know the Chronicle of Philanthropy, they did the surveys and they did the work back in 2018 and 2019. And a lot of that data was showing that even though 80% of the people said they were satisfied with their job, 52% were saying they were going to leave in the next 2 years. Well, next 2 years is now. And what's happened now to expedite that, to make that reality happen? So we have to look at ourselves, and it's got to be a part of every conference. It needs to be a part and addressed in some way, that we have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to do what we want to do in the sector.
Wow. Yeah, there's so much power baked into everything you just said, and also about employer retention and building long-term relationships with donors, which can help to stave off donor attrition and also the loss of the whole donor population, just by learning how to treat our colleagues, our employees, right. And if right now you talked about how, your friend saying that, well, hey, thanks to our fundraisers, we're all safe for the next 3 months, which sounds like academic probation to me. It's terrifying. But the real problem there is that it's all based on fear, right? And we're already living through the fear of the virus and plenty of other things that we're battling for social justice right now. So if people are saying, well, my gosh, I have to produce, and I might lose my job if I don't produce, then the reason they're staying in those jobs is because they're afraid of losing the jobs, not because they love what they do and they know they can do more. So you just gave a framework for how we can keep people motivated by simply helping them, not to just do the nice self-care pieces like go take a walk, sure, take off a personal day, but rather really build that into our program for retaining employees, for making their lives really full and robust and meaningful. I know you went through the 12 stories in your book, which we're all going to read. I'm curious about two things. First, how you got people to open up and tell those stories and then put them into print. And then secondly, I assume that there's a call to action built into that as well. So what kind of action do those stories help us to take?
Well, to your first question, all the folks featured are people that I've met along the way. A lot of them are local to the Tampa Bay area, some to the state of Florida, and then there's a couple that are national. And they're just people that I've had the unbelievable fortune of getting to know. And I think people that have been through traumatic experiences and people that are willing to share, and be a little bit vulnerable on stage and share things, end up finding each other, no matter how big the conference is, end up finding each other and developing a relationship. And I've had an incredible opportunity to do that with all of these folks. We have published authors in the group, multiple people that have done TEDx talks, CEOs, bank presidents, celebrity chefs, licensed therapists. We just have corporate lawyers. We have people that have had a tremendous amount of success professionally. And I think when we look at stigma, we kind of default to, oh, there was somebody panhandling on the side of the road. They looked like they had mental illness. They were talking to themselves. We make it a poverty issue. We make it a homeless issue. And that's doing mental illness a disservice because that adds to the stigma associated with it. We're coming at it with a whole different level. All these people are incredibly successful, and they're known in their communities as being successful people in their communities. So you don't look at them and go, I wondered if they stayed up all night because their son has had a drug problem for the last 18 years. Or, I wondered if somebody who's known for having a successful company because they've been featured in Fast Company magazine, I wonder if they've ever had suicidal thoughts. And the answer is yes. So, we're addressing stigma in a different way. So all of these folks are either affiliated with me personally or have become affiliated with Grace Point over the years because of the connection to the mission. The second part of that question was the call to action. That's what's huge. We're not here to write a book. I'm not trying to recreate anybody's trauma. I'm trying to show that an ordinary individual went through an extraordinary situation, and now they're doing good in the world and helping others despite what they went through. And all of these folks, in some way, whether it's more public or private, have found platforms to try to help others. So what happened to them, or what they suffered from, or the grief and loss that they suffered from, does not continue to happen at the rate it's happening. So they're actively going out and continuing the conversation. They're actively going out and calling out stigma. They're actively writing or publicly speaking or appearing on TV shows or radio shows and saying, enough's enough. We need to address this. We need to call it out. We need to talk about it more. And we need to encourage more people who have been impacted to share their story as well, so that fear of disclosure is no longer there.
I got to ask you what you think things look like coming out the other end of all this kind of collective trauma we're experiencing, especially for the nonprofit sector. You're there in your office. A lot of us are not returned to our offices yet. We don't know what that will look like. We are having the difficulties of reaching out to our donors. Some organizations have done brilliantly. We've been hearing their stories. Others have been fearful about even reaching out. And then there's a whole idea about, was the normal before really all that great? Or are we looking for something new that might be a better framework for social good? As you look forward personally, and then look for the field, what do you imagine this could look like on the other end of this whole thing?
I really do. I mean, that's a really, really great question. And I think the answer that comes immediately to my mind is, I hope it brings us together. I think we've been siloed for way too long. I think we've been in competition for way too long. You mentioned, was it really that great before? And I don't know that it was, because I was constantly telling people when I was speaking at conferences that we were in a donor retention crisis before COVID even hit. So if we were already losing 50% of our donors a year and 80% of our new donors every year, how romantically are you thinking about that past? So, I want us to realize that, in a sector where we are servant leaders, where we help people for a living, we can be doing that more to other people in our sectors to uplift it, similar to what they've done in the startup community, similar to what they've done in the education community, we can do that too. And I think we're actually more natural at doing it.
Thank you, Ian, so much for all of this. Really do appreciate it. Before you go, tell us how we can get the book.
All right, the book is on pre-sale right now. It's actually been turned into a publisher. It's a great publisher in Tampa called Now SC Publishing. I can't thank them enough for their amazing support. It'll be available in about 5 to 6 weeks. We do have a site right now, StrongerThanStigmaBook.com, where you can check out a little video about the book. There are a couple of excerpts in there, a couple of stories shared, but a little bit about why the book and what we hope happens from it. So we're excited about it. We're moving forward with it. I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations with other influencers and conferences. I think we've hit a tipping point with mental health in our profession. And I'm excited about more people coming to the forefront to speak of their own lived experience and to continue to push self-care and help one another. So I'm excited about that. I'm actually optimistic about that. So thank you for the opportunity to share just a little bit about why we did the book and what my hope for the future is.
No, thank you, Ian. Really do appreciate everything you do and for hanging out and talking a little bit today. We'll make sure to put that in the chat, but also in the Facebook page where people tend to look at this content for a longer period of time and direct people over and get a copy of that. And not just to sit in their houses and read it alone, but to share it with their colleagues. That's so important right now. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And everybody, we are, of course, having another session tomorrow with Scott Koskowski. So you can read all about that at DonorSearch.net. That's of course, the company that is providing us this platform for all these discussions. So we're so grateful to them for this. And you'll see that now the Mastermind sessions are really ramping up as we head into August, fully into August, and then into the fall. So do look for at least 3 sessions per week, including a special session, which is a wrap-up from the Unbounded conference. That was originally slated for this week. We have rescheduled it for next week. And there's going to be a lot in that, including a great video you'll enjoy seeing with, I think it was about 115 different presenters we had over a 12-week period while we've all been kind of locked into our houses. So I hope you'll enjoy that. But in the meantime, stay healthy and good to one another. Talk to you soon.